Thanks everyone for joining our webinar on organizing a pop-up event. My name is Maggie Malin from the Active Transportation Alliance, and I'm an advocacy manager here. So pop-up events are temporary projects such as a bike lane or a crosswalk that made out of something temporary like duct tape, and they can have a big impact on building community support, both public and political support for walking and biking projects. So Bike Walk Every Town, just to give you a little background, this is our suburban advocacy skills building program and networking platform. So again, thanks for all of you who are joining the live webinar. Today we have Heather Schady from Active Trans, who will be talking about her experience organizing pop-up events in the suburbs, and then also Anne Nagle from Wilmette, who's an advocate who organized her own pop-up last fall. So if any of you have any comments or questions during the webinar, if you're actually watching the webinar live, there's a little I am button in the left corner that you can type in any questions. You can also email me if you're not watching the live webinar but listening on the phone. So my email is maggie@activetrans.org. And feel free to email me with questions, which we'll address at the end of the webinar. So just a little bit of background about Active Trans. So the Active Transportation Alliance, we're a nonprofit, and we're here advocating for walking, biking, and public transit to create healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. You might know us from we do MB Bike the Drive, and we've been around for over 30 years, and we're located in Chicago, but we're covering the entire Chicagoland region. Here are our sponsors for the webinar, REI and UIC, so thanks to them. And then just so you know, the webinar is being recorded, so we'll be posting this on YouTube later. And I want to introduce Heather Schady. She is our Senior Transportation Planner at Active Trans, and she was also formerly our manager for Safe Routes to School. She has previous experience organizing in different areas such as affordable housing and open space, and she has her master's in urban planning from Tufts University. So I'm going to hand it over to Heather.
Thank you, Maggie, and hello, everyone. So today I am going to talk about a series of pop-up complete streets projects that Active Transportation Alliance did during the summer of 2017. So before I get into that and what we did, I thought I would give you just a little context for what complete streets demonstration projects are. So you may not have heard of them as this term. You may have heard of them as tactical urbanism, pop-up urbanism, or even guerrilla demonstrations. There's kind of a lot of different names out there and ways that people refer to it, but the idea of complete streets demonstration projects are that they are low-cost, temporary alterations to the built environment, really designed to inspire long-term change. They're there to help cities test out a new design on their streets that they may not be sure will work. And they're a way to improve public space without making a really long-term, expensive investment and making sure it actually works for users before making it permanent. So there's lots of examples out there. If you Google pop-up urbanism, you'll find beautiful pictures from around the country and around the world. But you can find everything from temporary plazas in the middle of streets or in parking spaces. You might see storefront improvements, pop-up kind of stores and shops that come into business districts that have vacancies. There's a plethora of streetscaping projects out there. You may have seen some from New York or out on the West Coast. There's opportunities for public seating, and there's also different projects that focus on roadway improvements, which is what we did. So there's many goals that communities who do these types of projects are trying to achieve. In some cases, it's really just a way to engage the community on street design. I think we're all familiar with kind of these long public meetings that, where planners and engineers are talking about projects, showing schematics and sheets of paper. That's not a really engaging way to show people what a bike lane could look like or what a bump out might look like. So this is a way to get communities to engage in street design in a very different and tactile way. These projects can also help reach a broader audience. So again, thinking back to that public meeting model, there might be 10, 15 at most people who care about a project and actually want to take the time and put in the time to come to a public meeting. But with a tactical urbanism project, it's right there out in the street. People might be driving by, people might be walking by. They may not even have known it was taking place, but they see it and want to find out what's going on and have an opportunity to learn in a way that they may not have otherwise. Building awareness is another way that demonstration projects can help a community. So people may just not be aware of what a certain facility looks like, and by putting it down on the street, they can see it and understand what it is and what it does and see that, hey, actually this isn't so bad. This actually could be a good thing for our community. Same goes for letting people try it out. These projects can also be a way to gather feedback from the public. So maybe you're wondering, can we reduce a street from 4 lanes down to 3 and do a road diet? Well, by doing it as a temporary treatment rather than a long-term improvement, you can actually get real-time data from people using the space or from people who have used it and find out if it works, if it doesn't, what they think. So the only final thing I'll say is that in a lot of communities, these tactical urbanism projects have actually helped fast-track projects. So projects may be on the books, may have not made any advancement over time, but by doing a demonstration project, communities may realize, hey, actually this really works well for us and we want to make sure it gets built. So maybe they fund it out of their budget, or maybe they go to seek funding from the federal government after doing it. So there's a lot of different approaches communities can take when doing a pop-up project. They could be planned and well publicized, something that is kind of put out there to the community, or they can be much more spontaneous and just kind of plopped down overnight, sort of a surprise to the community. They can be any duration of time. Our projects, which we'll talk about, were only down for a few hours. But other communities have done them for days, weeks, or even months. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve with this project and how long you can commit to doing it. Pop-up demonstrations can also be kind of community-centered or top-down. So sometimes they start from the ground up. You'll hear about Anne's project, which was kind of that example. Or they may be more top-down, the government saying, we'd like to try this out and see what our community thinks. And that's more of the approach that we took at Active Trans with our projects because we were working with community partners. So a little bit about our events. Our project was funded by PITCH, which stands for the Partners in Community Health Project. It was a U.S. Centers for Disease Control grant that was funded to the Cook County Department of Public Health, and we were a technical assistance provider on any kind of built environment work they were doing around active transportation. And our projects focused on 6 communities in suburban Cook County: Richton Park, Willow Springs, South Chicago Heights, Steger, Skokie, and Midlothian. And the reason we focused on these 6 communities was that each of them had developed a complete streets policy with us prior to doing their pop-up event, and we wanted to really find a way to demonstrate to their populations what complete streets are, especially when a policy may not really tell you what that is. It's not really a physical thing. So I'd like to show you a quick video of what of our projects. We're going to see if this works. It may not. And if it doesn't, I can explain a little bit more about them. Okay, well, it looks like it won't work, but you have the link there on your slides, and you'll be able to watch it at your leisure. But with each of these communities, just to give you a little background, we worked with them to identify a site, and after identifying the site, we just developed a design process, a kind of design recommendations for what could be done, and then went out and put down duct tape, plants, all kinds of things on the street to demonstrate what that could look like. Is it working, Maggie? Okay. We're trying one more time to share this window. Okay, so it looks like the video is not showing up. Sorry about that. So again, if you're able to take some time to watch it at some point, you'll be able to get a little bit of a better sense of what we did in our projects. But I'll give you some kind of tips for success in what we did when working on our projects for tactical urbanism. So there's kind of a 6 steps to success that summarize what we did. Starting with get buy-in, keeping it simple, designing to solve your problem, being creative and fun, having a traffic management plan, and building, celebrating, and breaking down. So, step 1, getting buy-in. So I think for our project in particular, it was really important for us to get buy-in from a lot of different people at the community level that were involved in roadway decision making. And I would say, and I would argue that some of the more successful projects should do this as well. So you may, at the start of this, when you have an idea for a pop-up project you'd like to do, you may want to talk to your public works department, engineering, village manager, police, fire, elected officials, or other community members. And sort of getting their buy-in at the forefront of a project can really help things go much more smoothly, especially when we talk later about things like road closures, making sure that you get all the support you need to build out your project. The next step is to think about keeping it simple and keeping it local. So in our case, we tried to focus only on local streets for easier implementation. I know that in most communities, the problem areas are usually an IDOT controlled road or maybe even a county controlled road, but their process for approving a project happening on their streets is much more cumbersome and time consuming than it would be to do it on a local street. And oftentimes you may not get their approval at all, even if you have a design that is warranted by their design guidelines. So to kind of save yourself some trouble and some heartbreak, I would say focus on your local streets when you do these kinds of projects. We also recommend working with your local government or whatever committee you're working on to identify a few potential project locations. So you may say, hey, we have these kind of 3 or 4 problem areas in our community. Let's go look at them and see which ones we think are most feasible for our project, our demonstration. And I would also offer to you to visit each of these locations with your local officials, whether it's public works, engineering, or even elected officials, to discuss what different design options could help improve the site, identify any potential challenges there might be to making improvements, and just sort of to get everybody on the same page about a project. While you're there, I also highly recommend measuring the area and taking really good measurements, because you're going to need that to know later how many materials to buy and what your overall design needs to look like. Okay, so on to step 3. Now that you've worked with your local officials and you've selected your site and talked through some of the issues and challenges, it's now time to design to solve your problem. So oftentimes there's a few places you can look to help you figure out design solutions. You can see here on this slide we have some pictures from our project in Willow Springs, where we are looking at a roundabout that's in their downtown area, sort of right next to their metro station. The roundabout was built larger than it needed to be. It's supposed to be a single lane roundabout, but it's wide enough to accommodate 2 lanes of traffic. And the village was having a lot of problems because of that. Drivers were often kind of driving around each other, and sometimes there were crashes occurring in the roundabout. So the village wanted to figure out ways to improve that design, make it safer for people, and kind of narrow the roundabout while also making it a place that people can still walk and feel comfortable. So we worked with them to develop a few solutions. Some included putting parklets in the roundabout, so to narrow it so there'd actually be like little green spaces rather than travel lanes. And some of our solutions included making the circle of the roundabout wider. In the end, we worked with the community and found that they wanted to have parklets, so that's what we did for that design. But in your project, every project will be different, and so there's lots of places you can look for design solutions and ideas to move your project forward. For example, your area may already be included in a local transportation plan or your comprehensive plan. So I suggest starting there and seeing what design recommendations were made for the street you have in question, and see if there's any ideas that you think might work for your pop-up demonstration. You can also talk again to your public works or engineering department or planners about solutions for this area. They may have heard about it a dozen times already and have some ideas for how to improve it, but they just haven't been able to secure funding or move a project forward for various reasons. So by talking to them, you can actually get some real answers on solutions they have in the works and help them see what it could look like and help them actually improve the project in the long term. If those two ideas don't work, you can also look to a few sources online. For example, StreetMix, streetmix.net, allows you to look at a cross-section of a street. So it's a sort of view of a street. If you have a measurement of how wide the street is, you can see how wide parking lanes can be, how wide bike lanes can be, how wide kind of everything is on that street. So you can use that to kind of design out a plan and understand what fits within your right-of-way. Another site that's really beneficial is pedbikesafe.org. Here, excuse me, you can go and look for different countermeasures for different problems you have. So say you're looking at an intersection that is unsignalized and uncontrolled, and the problem there is that drivers aren't stopping for pedestrians. You can go in, kind of select the design problems you're having, and it'll shoot out different solutions that may be helpful for that area. So again, you don't have to be an engineer or a planner to kind of know what's the right answer. There's tools out there that can help you do it. So step 4, now you've got your design ready, you've got all of your decision makers on board, you've got your site selected. Now it's time to kind of be creative and have some fun. Here you're going to think about selecting materials that work for whatever design you've selected. It may be something as simple as duct tape for striping bike lanes or striping other pavement markings. You may want to get some chalk to draw bike symbols, arrows, and different words on the pavement. We found a really helpful tip from our friends at TrailNet in St. Louis to use roofing paper and oil-based paint for your crosswalks. So you can see the picture in the upper right-hand corner. That's what our crosswalks looked like for all the projects we did, and we just kind of laid them out and duct taped them to the ground. But they were really graphic and really looked like a crosswalk, which was great in my opinion. You can think about potted plants to build out bump outs, roundabouts, or different kind of more vertical features in your design. Maybe you need some fake grass to build a parklet or a parkway. My advice to you for all of this is if you're working on a larger site, just make sure you give yourself enough lead time to order projects or to order products. We found that a lot of things, if we were ordering 10 rolls of roofing paper, it took a long time to get. So we sometimes needed up to a month in advance to get those in order. Just a couple of other tips we learned. You definitely want to prep what you can in advance. So all of our crosswalks we painted before we built anything, so long before the build date, just so we had them on hand and didn't have to paint on site. And we also needed to have a place to store materials. So at Actor-Trans, none of us really have garages. Our employees are living in high density housing and don't have a lot of space. And our office was pretty packed with just general office supplies. So we needed help from the communities we worked with to find storage. And oftentimes that meant we had to store things and have them shipped directly to the public works facility in the community where we were working. So having, again, that just kind of goes back to like having that good relationship with the community really helps make this project go more smoothly and makes things go easier. And we were really lucky too that every public works department where we ship materials were kind enough to drop them off the day of the build day, and they all stuck around to help us out and put things up. Okay, so the next step is to have a traffic management plan. So when in all this, remember you're working in a street and you want to make sure that safety is your number one concern. So, working with the local police department can really help you make sure that everybody stays safe. And every community that we worked in treated their traffic safety plan a little bit differently. The top picture again is from Willow Springs. There, the police officers were more informal about it, and they shut down the roads that we were working in, but let us know if they needed to wave some people through. They tried not to, but a few times they did. Skokie, on the other hand, had a very organized traffic safety plan. So the street was shut down for 2 hours at the front end of the project and 2 hours as we were breaking it down. There were mobile message signs placed at the two ends of the street to let drivers know there was a new traffic pattern and let them know what the detour was. And there were also signs placed out the day before the event to let drivers know that there would be a change. So again, a lesson here is just make sure to communicate with police and let them know what you're doing. Make sure you have a way for the people who are putting out these installations to be safe. And also make sure that everybody who abuts the site or who has to drive through it knows that they may not be able to that full day. The next and final step is to build, celebrate, and break down. So here's your fun day. You've done all the hard work, and now you're ready to put out your site and your installation. You probably have already recruited volunteers to help you, and they're all there. So once you're ready and to have everything ready and you have everything put down, you want to make sure that people know what's happening. So maybe you invite elected officials and decision makers to see the project. Maybe you're able to invite your local media to cover your story and show what you've done and get people's reactions to it. You yourself may also want to record people's reactions. So this picture here is of some students we worked with at Niles North High School in Skokie. And not only did they get to take a day off of school to help us build the site and break it down, but they also, during the project, helped us count people who were using the crosswalk, drivers who were complying with the must stop for pedestrian laws in a new crosswalk we built, and they're also asking for fellow students' reactions to the projects to see what they thought. So again, this wasn't really scientific data collection, but it was data nonetheless, and something that I think the village valued having collected. And following kind of all this hard work that you've done, you also want to make sure you leave yourself some time to break it down and get all the materials out of there. So if you're looking for different ways to fund a project like this, you can look at a few different places. There's not a ton of funding out there for tactical urbanism, but I think if you think creatively about it, you can find ways to fund projects without kind of a lot of investment. First of all, you may be able to work with local hardware stores or even a dollar store to donate supplies or materials, or even grant money to purchase those. You may also want to think about seeking a grant from a foundation. For example, right now there's a grant program available from the AARP, their Livable Communities Fund, which is actually designed just for this purpose to fund tactical urbanism projects in local communities. You can look to Smart Growth for America. That's a national organization that at least once a year funds different tactical urbanism projects at a much higher dollar amount. And you can also look to local foundations. Maybe you have a local hospital or healthcare provider that can help you help pay for some of your supplies. And another idea is even to ask your local municipality if they'll help cover some of the costs of materials. For example, in every community that we worked in, we were able to get borrow their traffic cones, so we didn't have to spend a lot of money buying new ones, which can get kind of expensive. So if you're thinking about doing one of these projects in your area, we'd love to hear about what you're planning, and please feel free to reach out to Maggie or I about it. We will definitely spread the word about your event. In the future, as we find grants available for projects like these, we'll continue to share them with you and others to make sure you're aware that they're out there. We're always happy to provide advice when we can. So if you're kind of trying to troubleshoot a project, please, feel free to reach out and we can try to give you some sage or not so sage advice about what we know. And on a minimal basis, we are available for paid consulting work to help communities do these types of projects. So it's sort of a case by case basis, but if you're interested in something like that, do reach out to us and we can try to work with you. And there's lots of other resources out there for this type of work, so please feel free to check these out. Quick Builds for Better Streets is done by People for Bikes. It kind of talks about different projects that have been done around the country. Soul Your Streets, a how-to guide, was written by TrailNet, which is a sister organization of ours down in St. Louis who did similar projects to ours. Tactical Urbanism, Short-Term Action for Long-Term Change is a book written by Michael Leiden, who's kind of the founder of this type of work and has done a lot of projects around the country. And then again, you can check out our pop-up videos. We've made a video for each site we've worked at, and we also made a kind of overview video that you can kind of learn and see what we did. So that is my presentation. Here's my contact information if you'd like to reach out. And I'm going to turn it back to Maggie now.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So I will be sent, if you registered for this webinar, I'll make sure to send out all of the links that Heather shared, as well as some links that Anne will be sharing. So you'll have those. And but now I want to introduce you to Anne Nagle. So want to get Anne unmuted here. All right, so Anne she lives in Wilmette, and she was a physician, and she's very committed to improving walking and biking in our communities and helping people get healthier. And we actually spoke to Anne a few months ago, and we did a blog post about her background in advocacy, and she was actually last year involved in America Walks Walking College and put together an action plan to improve walkability to a school in her area. So I will turn it over to Anne now. So Anne, can you hear? Are you here?
I'm good. Thanks,
All
Maggie.
right,
And thank you for this opportunity to speak today and to everyone who's joined the call today. I'm Anne Nagle. I live in Wilmette. I've been here for 21 years, and I'm involved in two organizations in our town. Go Green Wilmette is a local group that advocates for and tries to raise environmental awareness in our town. And I'm a board member, and kind of the hat I wear is for active transportation with that group. And I'm also involved with Bike Wilmette, which is a group of local citizens, and we advocate for safe opportunities to walk and bike in our town. And in both of these organizations, we work very closely with our village leaders, and that's been a wonderful partnership. And Maggie's going to be moving my slides, so I apologize if we'll get it down. Kind of my interest in pop-up demonstrations goes back to what ATA did in 2016. In Skokie, they did this pop-up demonstration at Niles North. And the school is located just west of Old Orchard Mall. And after school, kids cross willy-nilly across this very busy 4-lane road. And that has been a big concern. And so this pop-up demonstration created this crosswalk and this median. And it was a great opportunity to be there and observe. Excuse me. And I do want to say that afterwards we approached this crossing guard and we said, how did this pop-up work? And he turned to us and he said, it solved all my problems. So everybody used this. Normally there's a parking lot just east of the school, so a lot of parents wait over there for their students, and they kind of cross quickly in front of students, and this calmed the traffic, it funneled the kids, and it was just a win-win. Okay, and then probably another, on the next slide is this, I encourage you to watch this video. This was very inspirational to me. It's a People for Bikes video. It's pretty short, and it was Steal This Idea, a $600 protected bike lane demonstration. And the takeaway from this was, the quote that I liked the best was, they did this demonstration, the town loved it, it was up in Minneapolis, and one of the women said, this is not a nice to have, this is a need to have. We need to have protected bike lanes in our town. And that video really inspired me to say, what could I do? And then the last bit of inspiration came in 2016, on the next slide, when Mark Fenton came to town. Go Green Wilmette and Bike Wilmette sponsored, well, we hosted Mark for a 3-day Active by Design Summit. And his visit was sponsored by Illinois Bone and Joint Institute, and they were just a great partner. Mark spoke and did a keynote speech up at the Botanic Garden. Dr. Eric Schady from Illinois Bone and Joint also spoke. And then over the course of 3 days, we had 5 walk audits in villages on the North Shore. And here's Mark in Wilmette. We are going to be doing a reconstruction of one of the roads through downtown. So we wanted to get some information from him, like what could we do to try to enhance our downtown area. And our takeaway from that was just what Heather's talked about, is that pop-up demonstrations are a way to, at a low cost, try something out and garner citizens' response to that. So on the next slide, one of the ideas he spoke to is back in angle parking, and how that increases safety for bicyclists, other, seeing cars as you pull out, you're not backing into traffic. And people on the walk audit said, I've seen this in Austin, I've seen it in Denver. They liked it. What would it be like? So we decided to try it out in sort of a different, novel fashion. Every year in March, Go Green Wilmette hosts a one-day environmental fair called Going Green Matters, and it brings together about 100 exhibitors that have booths about active trans, energy, green landscaping, organic food, and many, many more things. So at that, and the next slide, you'll see we did a diorama of back and angle parking. And this was just an opportunity to move these little cars, and people would say, no, I can't back in at an angle. But actually, it's the first step of parallel parking. So give it a try with this car, and look what it does. You can see the bicyclist. You're not, as a bicyclist, you're not going to have somebody open their door in your line of traffic. So people tried it. We spoke to it. We ended up deciding it wasn't a right fit for Wilmette, but if someone visits Austin, they'll know what it's about and even maybe know how to do it. So I think it was a win. Thereafter, the next slide, please. Subsequently, last spring, I applied for a grant with Evanston Bicycle Club and was awarded monies to do a pop-up bike lane in town. And that kind of got the wheels turning, and my thoughts were, what if we could create a toolkit so that instead of even $600, there's really no cost to doing a pop-up demonstration. So I did apply for an AARP Community Challenge grant last summer and was really lucky to be the recipient of that grant, and very honored. So together with these 2 grant monies, we've put together a toolkit, and I'll tell you more about that. So the next slide. My biggest thing was what, again, Heather talked to you about, like vertical delineators. What could those look like? And that's where the cost is. So ARP actually works closely with Wikiblocks, and you can check their site out. And what they do is their idea is to create a toolkit for creating better blocks. And they have kiosks, they have benches. They're all made out of plywood. They have curb extensions. They're all made out of plywood, and they fit together like a puzzle and come apart, so you can reuse them. And this is their Coda planter. So my grant award allowed us to build 10 of these planters. And I worked very closely with Eric Cupp from Bridgewater Studio in Chicago, and he was just a great partner. So they turned out beautiful, and you'll see some more pictures. Next, please. So the community challenge, there's a quick turnaround. So we were awarded this grant monies. We built these planters, and in October, we put together a pop-up bicycle lane. This was our inaugural bike ride through the Village of Wilmette. Bike Wilmette partnered with the Park District, and we had a 10-mile bike ride through town, stopping at 4 Park District facilities, where a leader would tell a little bit about that facility and what the Park District was doing there. And the next slide, one of our stops was at Gilson Beach, and it was there that we created this pop-up protected bike lane demonstration. Out of necessity, the bike ride was going to come through about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but out of necessity, I was down there probably about 9 o'clock setting this up. Duct tape, signage, the planters. It was a beautiful fall day, as you can see, so there were lots of families down at the beach, and put out some pumpkins in October, and this was a magnet for kids and their families. So people would come over and talk about, why are you here? What is this? And I was able to have conversations not only with the bicycler on the tour, but families, and talked about how a protected bike lane makes the road safe for people from 80 to 80, so 8 to 80. And all these families would try it, and it really got the conversation going beyond the 70 people that were part of our bike tour. The next slide, please. We reconvened at the end of the tour at Mallinckrodt Center, which is one of where we started and stopped. That's a park in town. And it was an opportunity to say, what was that like? What do you think about it? We're actually, Wilmette right now has just been given monies from the village to create a pedestrian bicycle plan, and that's gone out for our FP. So those conversations could start, like, how can we make this better, and how can we make it safer in our town? So I think it got things going and was a wonderful experience. Next, please. Rolled back again in March of this year at Going Green Matters. We had photos about the pop-up protected bike lane. And this is our Bike Wilmette group. We had a chance to talk about that. And then in the next slide, we had one of the planners there, because we do want to offer these to municipalities or citizens that would like to do a pop-up demonstration. We hope that our people will use that at their block parties, something for the kids to do, the school bike rodeos. You can use these as for a parklet demonstration if you want to snag a parking spot in town, and also at our Summerfest. Different, think outside, and here you have the opportunity to borrow these and use these. And again, we have signage, we have tape, we have a easel, so you can put those sticky notes up, and where would you like to see this? How would you like to see this? So. And then just to finish here are the CODA planners. It comes in pieces of 5, and we'll kind of just run through these. Goes together like a puzzle, no nails, no glue. You stand it up after you've got these 2 pieces on, and then put in the ends. And all 10 of these fit in my Honda Pilot. So, great. Thanks, Maggie. And so I just hope that pop-up demonstrations can start those conversations and ultimately lead to changes, like we've seen our neighbors down in Evanston on this protected bike lane by Northwestern University. I'm hopeful that it will, but it just introduces people to these ideas. And again, it was a lot of fun. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Anne. It was great to hear about you taking on this project and Bike Wilmette, doing this and kind of taking it into your own hands and showing people what it's like to have better biking and walking facilities. So it's inspiring to see that. So and thank you for being willing to share those protected bike lane structures with other communities. So Anne's contact info is right here, as well as Heather's and my own contact info, so feel free to reach out to any of us. If you have any questions right now about what was discussed about the pop-up events, feel free to type in a comment in your left-hand bottom corner, or email me, Maggie, at activetrans.org. And we do have one question, or a couple questions actually, that I'll turn it over to Heather to address those. But before I turn it over to Heather, just wanted to mention, so our May webinar, we're still figuring out a date, but the topic we're hoping is going to be about bicycle pedestrian advisory councils. So if your community, there are a handful of communities in the Chicagoland region that have these advisory councils that really help work with the village staff elected officials on, making sure that all of these ideas, these biking and walking transit ideas, are actually implemented, and then also try to, gather more community support. So we're going to hear from a couple people, um, a few advocates who are part of these advisory councils. So, but again, we're still trying to figure out the date, so I'll be sending out an email about that in the future. But for now, let me turn my headphone over to Heather.
All right, hello again. Okay, so our first question is, how did you overcome obstacles at outset during discussions with stakeholders and implementations? How did you overcome them? Any specifics you can share? So I'll say that our project was different than I think most tactical urbanism projects in that we had already been working with the communities for a year to develop complete streets policies. So we had a steering committee made up of the decision makers and stakeholders I recommended in my slides to include in any discussions that we had been meeting with once a month already for over a year to develop a policy. So we had a pretty strong relationship with them from the get-go and kind of already had done a lot of education on what complete streets are, what the villages or city in some cases had, what their goals and priorities were. So we had I guess it's a little bit different than I think a lot of people might experience when they're coming into this kind of fresh. So we didn't have any obstacles kind of with our stakeholders or in kind of getting approval and sort of the buy-in on the projects. I think our bigger obstacles are really just kind of making sure that we were getting all the supplies we needed and all the volunteers in place for the build day. So I would say though, if you're getting started on your projects right now and don't really have the relationships that we had, start to build those, and that will help make your entire project go a lot more smoothly. So, have that relationship with Public Works, because then you'll be able to call the guy, whoever's in charge, and say, hey, like, can we count on you to take this delivery at this time and day, or work with the village manager and elected officials to make sure they're okay with whatever design is happening in their area, and also to work with them to get buy-in from other staff members. Anne, do you want to respond at all to that if you're not on mute right now?
I'm off. We were really lucky. Again, the Park District was very willing to let us do this. I did approach the village and said, could we do it on a block on one of the streets? But again, it does require all those other stakeholders. So this was an easier way to do it safely. So that's what worked for us.
Great. Yeah. Again, I think it's just a matter of making sure you're getting buy-in. And someone commented too that it sounds like we want to find friendly folks and get them to help build a network. And that's absolutely true. It's always finding that person, maybe within the government, maybe an elected official who is a supporter of this work, and then they can help you get buy-in from others. And that's kind of key in any kind of advocacy or organizing project, I would say. Okay, our next question is, did either of you do these projects on an IDOT road? That's one obstacle I face. IDOT roads are primary routes in town. So again, I can speak to this one. We did try to do a project on an IDOT road in Midlothian. We were working with the village on, to help them develop a complete streets policy. At the same time that we were doing that work, the Center for Neighborhood Technology and CNT were working with the village to do a stormwater management plan on 147th Street, which is an IDOT road. And the village really wanted, because they were already doing so many planning studies and efforts on that street, they wanted to do their tactical urbanism project on it as well. So we held a meeting with IDOT. It was kind of a convening of the minds. IDOT, CMAP, CNT, and Active Trans were all there, along with village staff and elected officials, to talk about doing the project. IDOT was not opposed to it, but the first thing they asked us is to submit a design proposal to them so that they could review it and see if they'd approve it. And we did that. We let them know what we were planning. I'm trying to go back and think on what we actually proposed. And I know it included a couple of new crossings across 147th Street. I think it included some areas where we'd bump out curbs on the side streets that abutted 147th Street, and there may have been some other kind of rain-ready stormwater management ideas included in our proposal. We submitted our plan to IDOT and waited for about 12 weeks for approval. And when they came back to us, they unfortunately weren't able to get their review process done in enough time for us to, be able to fulfill the requirements of the grant we were working on. So they came back they didn't approve what we had recommended, basically because what we recommended didn't fit their design standards, which we knew would happen. Their design standards are really strict, and there's a reason for why their streets are often the streets that don't really feel safe in your community. So that's kind of why, that's why in my presentation I recommended starting on a local road and doing it there first, because IDOT will be a pretty big hurdle to anything you're working on, and oftentimes this design solution that would be the best one for that one of their streets isn't something that will fit within their design standards or be easily approved by them. I don't think it's not necessarily something you should walk away from. It's worth having a conversation, and especially if your community, your municipality is in support of it and wants to see this move forward. But I think it won't be an easy sell to them, and you may actually not be able to get the project done with their approval. Anne, do you have anything to add to that?
No, thanks though. That was great, Heather.
Yeah. Okay. It looks like we don't have any other questions, but we can wait maybe another few seconds to see if we get any. Okay, I think we're good. Maggie, do you want to sign off with anything?
Okay, I'm back. Heather and I are sharing headphones, so so all right. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. And again, feel free to reach out to any of us with questions, and I will be sending out an email with a bunch of resource links. And definitely let us know if you end up creating a pop-up event in your community, because we'd love to promote it and love to support you as we can. So thanks, everyone.